Dear social worker, welcome to the podcast that prioritizes the person behind the title, social worker. I'm your host, Lisa Rann, and I'm here to inspire and encourage your personal development, promote your well-being and leadership development for your social work practice. I transitioned from a decade in social work to an author and leadership development coach for social workers nationwide to help you overcome your personal or professional challenges through the Social Work Coaching Hub. The brand new Social Work Coaching Hub offers resources, books, journals, and social work events. Visit socialworkcoachinghub.com. Today, we're going to talk about overcoming moral distress. Let's talk. Moral distress may not be a term that you've heard before, but it's likely because you're a social worker, it's something you've experienced. So let's start by defining what moral distress is. Then we'll talk about the different types of moral distress, the impact, and then we'll give you some tips to overcome. So moral distress is an internal struggle, and it arises when you face an ethical dilemma. So feeling trapped between your professional obligation and the limitations of the systems that we work within. There are three primary types of moral distress: moral uncertainty, moral constraint, and moral residue. I'm going to walk you through all three, and then we'll talk about the impact, followed by some tips to overcome. Number one, moral uncertainty. So this occurs when social workers, you, are unsure about the morally right course of action in a given situation. Now, it may be due to not having a clear understanding of ethical standards, policies, or best practices. But this is about being in a place where you're unsure. You're unsure how to get from place A to place B and how to do that correctly. I know in my experience, I wanted to make sure I was making the right decision. And in social work, you're faced with something new every single day. And I know in my coaching sessions that I had last week, I had a few of my coachees that were saying, I'm not sure I'm actually doing the right thing. I feel like I'm just winging it, basically. That's moral uncertainty, because they want to make sure they're doing the right thing. It's unclear, for whatever reason, if they are doing the right thing. Perhaps you couldn't get the advice from management in time. Perhaps they couldn't find the policy that they needed in time. There's so many possibilities. But essentially, it's a bridge between what you think is right and the system. This can happen a lot when you're working with other agencies, right? You may say, as the advocate for the family, this is the direction of travel that we all need to be working within. However, the system with housing or the mental health profession and professionals that you're working with say, well, this is our system. And based on our system, based on our policies, based on what it is, the way that we work, we can't meet this particular need. Often it's, we can't meet this need at this time. They don't meet the eligibility criteria. And you're the advocate and you're saying, well, it's clear this family need this type of support. We are not the experts in this area. We are going to need support from this agency. I've had so many meetings where I've had professionals say, that's not within our remit, or they don't meet the criteria to access this service. And then it leaves this family in a place of limbo, and it leaves you in a place of limbo. You have that moral uncertainty because it's clear what's needed, but the systems that are around are not giving way, are not making a way for you to meet that need. That is moral uncertainty. The other element of moral uncertainty, that it will be remiss of me not to mention this, it's around employment challenges. There's so many social workers that I speak to that have employment challenges. There will be in all professions. We're not special, but it will be in all professions. However, there's moral uncertainty in those spaces as well, because you can be very clear about something you have said or done that you felt was right. Or you may be in a position where someone has said something to you, done something to you in an employment capacity, and you're unsure morally what is the right course of action to take. If you raise it, if you escalate it, this may be the consequence. If you don't raise it or escalate it, this could be the consequence. And as a result, you're in a place of moral uncertainty, and that can cause a lot of distress. Because often what I've come across is they don't want to put themselves in a position where they'll be A, vulnerable, but B, there's a consequence for saying something. Now, this conversation is moving into a different realm. As you can probably see, there's a slight shift. I'm not going to delve into it too much on this podcast episode, but I just want to give you a 360 view of what moral distress can include. It can be about the systems that we're working within, but it also can be about you personally and your personal experiences, on your experiences with employment, with local authorities, with charities, whoever you work for. Feeling uncertain about what you're going to do, particularly if you want to, you're the kind of person, you really want to take the right course of action. You want it to be perfect. You want to make sure the message that you want to get across is expressed in the right way and to the right people. But for whatever reason, the clarity on what decision to make, it's just not there. That can cause distress. My brand new publication, the Self-Care Journal for Social Workers, is tailored specifically just for you. It's a vibrant journal designed to guide you towards a happier, healthier, and more balanced professional life. It is a 6-month undated journal, and it is available on Amazon and on Etsy. So go ahead and treat yourself. Let's talk about moral constraints. This is a second type of moral distress, and this can arise when you know the ethically correct course of action, but are unable to follow through due to organizational policies, resource constraints. We know all about those post-COVID, or external pressures. So you are constrained in the action that you can take. So similar to what we talked about in moral uncertainty, when we were talking about you're asking other agencies, can you do this piece of work? And they're like, no, this is not within my remit. But you know that is the right service. That is the right piece of work. It's the right intervention for that family. But for whatever reason, you're unable to follow through with that plan due to organizational policies and resource constraints, service changes, budget changes. All of those elements can create constraints for you being able to successfully intervene with the right service for that family. Again, that can lead to moral distress. You know very clearly what needs to happen. For whatever reason, it cannot happen, or it's taking too long to happen. That's another thing. Waiting times can cause a lot of distress. And let's think of this from the family's perspective as well. If you're distressed about something being in place to support you, and then of course to impact on to have a positive impact, excuse me, on the family, it's exactly the same for the family. Imagine the moral distress that they are experiencing. The third type of moral distress that we're going to talk about today is moral residue. So, this is referring to the emotional and psychological impact that can linger after making a decision that conflicts with your moral values. So, these are feelings such as guilt or regret or self doubt. Briefly, I want to share with you, I remember carrying out a group coaching session, and it was with an IRO, a senior practitioner, and a social worker. And they had been working with a family for a considerable amount of time. Long story short, they had lots of feelings of shame and guilt and regret because there had been some changes within the family unit, and they felt as a professional group there was action that they could have taken that may have prevented what had happened. As a result of that, they sought coaching, and it was a very difficult session for them. There was lots of tears and lots of soul searching. And when it came down to it, it was clear they were in moral distress. And some of that moral distress was linked to moral constraints. And as a result of those constraints, they had to make the best of the situation they were faced with. They had to offer the best service that they could, given the direct services they wanted them to work with, for example, accessing counselling. And as a result of that intervention not being as accurate as they wanted it to and being in a timely way, there were some changes within the family, and that caused a lot of distress for them. This can happen in many ways for many different reasons. It doesn't have to be that extreme. But my hope is listening to this is resonating with you in some way. The different stages of moral distress, the different types of moral distress, and how that can come about. Sometimes you just do not have the power or the influence to make certain changes or to intervene in a certain way. You advocate, absolutely. But there are moments in time where we've all had to, in quotes, settle. And it's unfortunate, but particularly after COVID, there was a lot of settling because a lot of budgets had been cut. So a lot of services that were available before, they're no longer available. So what are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? Where do we send that family? How do we support them in the right way that they need to be supported? And the impact of that is what we're going to talk about next. If you want to promote your service or product on this podcast, get in touch. Email info@socialworkcoachinghub.com. Let's talk about the impact of moral distress. I'm going to raise three things here: normalizing, complacency, and confidence. Let's start with normalizing. If we feel we're unable to influence change and we have constraints that continually limit what we can offer families and limit our capacity to support, sometimes this can lead to normalizing. And you're demotivated to continue to challenge others and to advocate, because you're aware that the system, whichever system that is relevant for you, the system, for whatever reason, is creating some constraints for you. And as a result, that can just be over time normalized, almost like you're in submission to it because you know you can't influence it or change it. And that's something we have to be very careful of in social work. We have to be very careful of that, because when we start normalizing things that shouldn't be normalized, we begin to not see things that should be seen, that should be called out, that should be challenged. Number two, complacency. So similar to normalizing, complacency is where you're just going through the motions. You just accept what's happening. And when you work in that way, it can make it more challenging for you to see risk, to analyze, to critically analyze. And that can lead to you not challenging enough. That can lead to your assessments not being in depth enough and not showing the length and breadth and the ecological model of what's happening for that family. Complacency is a dangerous place to be. If you feel you're becoming complacent and just be nonchalant, essentially, that is a very clear indication that your distress has gone beyond just being distressed. You're now in a place where anything goes, you could argue. And we have to question, are we being effective when we're in that place? My answer to that will be no. And that will be a time that you seek support from your management, seek coaching or counseling, something that is going to help you, A, be inspired again, and B, be motivated to challenge, be motivated to look at the things that are causing you some distress and look at ways that you could influence or help to change these things. And you may be rolling your eyes at me and thinking, well, clearly I can't. That's why I've become complacent. But this is what coaching can offer. It can offer you a place of developing a fresh new perspective, challenging some of the thoughts that you have, developing a new narrative. At least if you were to come to coaching or come to counseling, wherever, at least just the act of that is not being complacent. Thirdly, your confidence. When you feel you can't influence or make change, when you are suffering moral distress, particularly over a period of time, maybe you've compartmentalized it. Maybe it's something that you are fighting every day, fighting those fires every day. Either one of those spectrums can lead you to a place where you are losing your confidence in your social work practice because you feel you're not making the impact that you want to make. You feel you're not making the intervention at the right time for the right family. You feel like, what's the point? If I can't access this service for this family, if I can't challenge my manager positively, well, what is the point of that? And as a result, you can just very slowly, it can chip away at your confidence to perform at the best of your abilities. So essentially what I'm saying here is moral distress you must pay attention to it when it's happening, because the impact can be so subtle, but it can be significant. Ever thought about joining the Swish community? That's the Social Work Coaching Hub community. We're going to be joining together for events later on this year. You can access resources, journals, you can have money off the journals and books, all of that good stuff. So get involved and go to socialworkcoachinghub.com and join the Swish community. I'll see you there. We've talked about the different types of moral distress. Don't forget there are more. There are more. There's moral injury and all of those elements there. But perhaps we'll carry that on to next week. We'll see. Secondly, we've talked about the impact of moral distress and its importance of paying attention to when you are feeling distressed. And lastly, we're going to give you some tips. I say we, but I mean I. Going to give you some tips. I like recording raw. I like recording raw. When it's too perfect, it's like that's not normal. That's not human. You do make these mistakes sometimes, so it is what it is. Okay, it is what it is. So I'm going to give you 3 tips on how you can attempt to overcome moral distress, and they're actionable tips. And it's going to help you to build resilience in your practice. It's going to help you to build in confidence to challenge. So let's get into this. Tip 1, cultivating ethical awareness and reflection. So this is about developing a strong foundation of ethical knowledge and staying updated on the evolving standards in social work. Now you may be thinking, well, what time have I got to do that? I hear you. I was there. I hear you. I hear you. Pick a channel. There's so many channels online, or send an alert to your phone from different social work magazines. I don't want to name them all, but from different social work magazines, from different social media pages. Most people have social media these days. If you're listening to this podcast, this is classed as social media, right? So have something that is linked to the evolving standards in social work that you listen to each week or that you read each week. You've got to engage in regular self-reflection and seek opportunities for ethical discussions with colleagues. You've got to seek those opportunities. So your team meetings is a great opportunity. If you want to, bring an article. Bring it for debate. I'm sure your manager will be more than happy that they are not the ones leading the whole meeting, right? So bring an article. You know, you've got to be able to find a space where you're developing your ethical awareness. And the way to develop is not all about being in your own head, but it's also about hearing other points of view. And then you begin to form your own views from that. I would also add here about your professional values. So you will remember looking at your professional and personal values during your social work training. I just want to remind you of that. Bring that activity out again. Bring that exercise out again and go through it again, because your values change all the time. They're not static. You know, it may be your top 3 values could be money, family, and a job. But that could change to family, a job, and money, depending on what season you're in your life, depending on your personal circumstances or your professional status at that time. So I would highly recommend that and you can just Google it, Google values exercise, and it will come up. That's something I would highly recommend that you do. And that is going to be part of the foundation of developing your ethical awareness. Tip number 2, key, and this is exactly where I sit: seek support and collaborate. You have to remember that you're not alone. I'm going to repeat that. You are not alone. Somewhere out there, there's another social worker who feels just like you do, that's had the experience just like you have. Somewhere out there is support out there for you. I am one of them. I'm here to support you. That's the point of the podcast. It's to give you some thought-provoking ideas, of course, to help you to develop. But as you know, I offer coaching. That is a form of seeking support. Aside from me, of course, you have support within your workplace. You have your employment assistant programs, your peers, your social worker, perhaps your manager, professional networks. Sometimes it helps to discuss moral dilemmas openly, and collaborating with multidisciplinary teams, including legal, if you're able to get them in the room. I know they're super busy, but that can help to explore innovative solutions and to work within the constraints of the system. Yeah. Building a support network can provide validation, guidance, and alternative perspectives, which again is going to help you with your ethical awareness and reflection. Lastly, tip number 3. Again, I sit within this realm: self-care and resilience building. Now, don't switch off the podcast. Don't do it. Don't press pause. Because I know, like, when have I got time for self-care? I've got to get up and do this. I've got to get the kids ready. I've got to do 10 million visits. I've got to write this. I've got a court statement. I hear you, and I've been there. And realistically, there are periods of time where you have to knuckle down and just focus on the work that's required of you. Sometimes it's a 2-week period or a 3-week period. But within that time, certainly you could be making plans for when that piece of work is finished, what you're going to do to ensure that you're maintaining your well-being, and you have got plans for your self-care. It's inevitable that over time, moral distress will have an impact on how you care for yourself. It's virtually inevitable, because any form of stress over a long period of time is going to have an impact on your mental or physical health in some way, because it's a form of stress. So prioritizing your self-care and emotional well-being is going to strengthen your resilience in the face of moral distress. You can almost argue that moral distress is guaranteed to happen in social work, because we're working within systems. There's several systems, from the local authority system to the multidisciplinary system to the political system. All of these systems we have to work within. So therefore, it's likely that moral distress is going to occur. So you can plan ahead now. Now that you've got the language as to what it is you're feeling, because often that's what social workers say to me in coaching sessions. They're like, I didn't know that was actually what I was feeling. When you put a name to something, it takes the weight off it. It can offer you an opportunity for a different perspective. Hence, engaging in activities that promote relaxation. Okay, that's what self-care is, relaxing. I spoke to someone last week who made a plan for self-care, and the plan was, I'm going to do nothing. She said, Lisa Ann, I'm not making any plan. I'm going to do nothing. And when she came back to the coaching session, she said to me, I did nothing. That particular day that I set aside for self-care, I did nothing, and it felt great. So let's not misinterpret what self-care is about. You don't have to go out there and get a massage. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to do anything. It's whatever you interpret it to be. And that's why I created the journal, the self-care journal for social workers. It goes through the different types of self-care, and helps you to identify, when you go through the coaching exercise, which type of self-care is your preference. And based on that, you then develop your self-care plan. So if self-care is just relaxation, what's relaxing to you? What is relaxing to you? That's all you need to identify. I would highly recommend, of course, I'm biased and I'm unashamedly saying the Self-Care Journal for Social Workers will help you. It's available on Amazon and Etsy. go to the socialworkcoachinghub.com. But even all of that aside, if you don't get the journal, essentially you just need to figure out, what do you want to do to relax? That's going to help you recharge and reboot, because often, and I'm trying to end this podcast at a decent time, because some people have said 40 minutes is too long. I know it is. I'm trying. But sometimes these ideas just come to me because I record raw, right? But essentially what I'm saying is, there are moments in time when you're going to feel completely and utterly distressed. It happens because of what we talked about today, or you're overwhelmed, or you're stressed. There's so many different elements and different contributing factors that can make you feel stressed as a social worker. We all know this, right? It's how we respond. That's the key. So when you are relaxing, self-caring, well-beinging, yes, I know that's not a word. When you're doing all of those things, you're building your resilience, you're recharging. Often people somehow forget that we're not machines. We turn up every day, we give our all, we do everything that we're meant to do, and beyond that. We're not machines. We can't just keep going at that level. So relaxing is recharging. Just like you need to charge your phone. Everyone charges their phone. Every night next to my bed is my phone and my charger. I know it probably shouldn't be next to the bed, but that's a different podcast for a different day. Your work phone, you have to charge it. Because why? It runs out of battery. Sounds so obvious. So why, as a machine, do we have to charge all of these, our phones and laptops every day, but we're not charging ourselves? You tell me how that makes sense. Moral distress, it's inevitable in the social work field. But if you're armed with the knowledge, support, and self-care / relaxation, you can navigate these dilemmas more effectively, and you can continue to make a positive impact with the families that you're working with. Remember the tips: cultivating ethical awareness, seeking collaboration and support, and prioritizing your well-being. I'm saying that loudly, prioritizing your well-being. Easier said than done at times. I have been there. Trust me, I have been there. But even in that week where you know that you are back to back to back to back, if you just have one lunch break in that week, one foot soak in that week, 1 hour of doing nothing, whatever it is that helps you to relax, you can use the self-care journal for social workers to help you with that and keep you on track. Yeah? My final message is to stay strong. Keep advocating for justice. Try your best not to normalize or become complacent or to doubt yourself. You're doing a great job. You are doing the best you can with what you've got available to you, with the resources that are able to help you. You are accessing those. Yeah? Stay strong. I'm here for you. I'll be back. And join me next time for an episode of Dear Social Worker, Let's Talk. God bless.